On this Saturday night, on-campus protests escalate. The pro-Palestinian movement sweeping U.S. universities and growing globally. Protest and counter-protest in London. Plus, the clashes and the crackdowns on student encampments.
As a member of the Jewish people, I feel my people being attacked.
The headlines that we are seeing, record profits as Canadians struggle to eat.
Shunning Superstore, how Loblaw became a lightning rod for sky-high grocery prices, and the month-long movement to shake it.
That's my son's bedroom, yep.
Trail of destruction.
It's complete devastation. I can't believe this happened so fast.
Violent tornadoes rip through the U.S. Midwest, where the severe tornado-spawning storms will hit next. And wish you weren't here. How tourists are ruining the world's greatest cities.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
A microcosm of the anger being felt around the world. 2 protests in London, England today. One by pro-Palestinian demonstrators calling for an end to the war in Gaza and facing them down. Shame on you. Shame on you. A counter-protest by supporters of Israel in its effort to destroy Hamas and bring the hostages home. Police officers on patrol to prevent any escalation. This elderly man, a Holocaust survivor, says history shows wide-scale protests against war can end hostilities.
It is a worldwide movement which is ever growing, like during the demonstrations against the Vietnam War. There is a chance of prevailing.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Anti-war protesters are digging in and vowing to keep up their fight on post-secondary campuses. At Montreal's McGill University, students set up a small encampment today, calling for an end to the war. In the U.S., from Northeastern University in Boston to Cal Poly on the West Coast, students are refusing to scale back, and police are upping their presence, arresting protesters and dismantling encampments, as the Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, calls on President Biden to send in the National Guard. In Gaza, meanwhile, ordinary people found a simple yet powerful way to write a message of thanks on whatever semblance of a home they have left. We'll have more on their situation on the ground, but Neetu Garcha begins our coverage tonight with the campus protests that just keep growing.
In one of the latest escalations, protesters and police clashed at Ohio State University. At Northeastern University in Boston Saturday morning, officers cleared protesters from an encampment where students were standing with linked arms. And inside Cal Poly Humboldt in Northern California, graffiti-covered walls and shattered glass leading to the president's office as the standoff with students continues.
If, in fact, they have moved out of Siemens, I'm told it's an open occupation.
It's still occupied.
Okay, thank you. So this is part of what we're trying to understand, right?
Institutional responses at campuses across the U.S. have varied from negotiations and dialogue with protesters to police crackdowns like at UT Austin.
This was exactly the plan. Music, food, teach-ins, educational stuff. And then they brought riot police and brought mace and brought cavalry.
At Columbia University in New York, the epicenter of the protests, a large encampment of tents in the middle of the campus remained overnight as talks with school administrators hit an impasse. Outside the gates, this exchange.
Israel should stop bombing civilian areas and killing the hostages. That would be great. Israel did not take the hostages.
Many of the demonstrators say they're peacefully protesting, asking their universities to divest from Israeli-linked companies profiting off the war in Gaza. Those calls echoed by this Jewish band outside the Supreme Court in Washington earlier this week, as state officials and some university leaders have labeled the protests as anti-Semitic.
A lot of the protests and encampments are Jewish-led alongside Palestinians, and so we reject that fundamentally.
As a member of the Jewish people, I feel my people being attacked.
This Stanford student drawing parallels between Gaza and his family's experience during the Korean War.
researching and learning about my own personal family history regarding like the Korean War, where 20% of the DPRK's population was just eliminated through like a super aggressive firebombing campaign.
Columbia University has a rich history of student activism, notably during the Vietnam War era. In 1968, the campus became a focal point for anti-war protests, similar to how it is today. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Washington.
Hamas has published a video of 2 more hostages taken from their homes on October 7th. We've decided to only show you still images from that video. The men are identified as 64-year-old Keith Siegel and 46-year-old Omri Miran. It's not clear when the video was taken. Speaking under duress, both captives mentioned the Passover holiday, and they urged the Israeli government to reach a deal with Hamas. Siegel, an Israeli-American, was taken with his wife from the kibbutz. She was freed in November. Miran was taken hostage from his home in front of his wife and his 2 young daughters. Back in the U.S., devastating tornadoes carved a path of destruction across the Midwest overnight.
Oh my gosh, look at that stovepipe.
Dozens of tornadoes plowed through Nebraska and Iowa on Friday, downing power lines as they crossed interstates and leveling hundreds of homes. Locals did what they could to escape, hunkering down in basements as roofs were ripped apart. The terrifying twisters packed wind speeds reaching 110 kilometers per hour. Now, incredibly, there are no reports of deaths so far.
That's my son's bedroom, yep, and I had told him to go to his mom's house. Yeah, and I'm glad he did.
Glad there's no fatalities in the neighborhood. I heard it's complete devastation. I can't believe this happened so fast.
We were under our kitchen and the pressure changed. Your ears popped and just an enormous amount of debris just was falling on the floor above us.
Today, locals sifted through what was left of their homes, salvaging what they could. But the risk isn't over. Tonight, there were fears of flash flooding, and a tornado watch is still in place for 55 million Americans from Michigan all the way to Texas, with forecasters warning of even more wild weather into Sunday. Disgraced movie producer Harvey Weinstein has been hospitalized following his return to New York City's Rikers Island jail. Weinstein's lawyer says the former movie mogul is undergoing several tests at Manhattan's Bellevue Hospital, adding that the 72-year-old needs a lot of help physically and is somewhat of a train wreck health-wise. Weinstein was transported back to New York on Friday ahead of a court appearance on Wednesday in relation to his overturned rape conviction last week. In this country, consumers fed up with the high cost of groceries are gearing up to send a message with their wallets. A planned boycott of Loba and its affiliated stores is gaining traction, while a petition calling for an investigation into the company for alleged profiteering is nearing 100,000 signatures. Abigail Beeman reports on the frustration and the planned action.
This cart cost me $130 for a meal and like some snacks, basically, so I'm kind of over it.
Kind of over it. Dale Camara is like most Canadians. New Ipsos polling done exclusively for Global News found 80% of people pay more for groceries each week, the majority $50 or more.
Or $1,000 a year that people are paying more for groceries than they were this time last year.
While prices are up everywhere, Loblaw is the biggest of Canada's Big Five grocers. Camara heard about the grassroots movement to boycott Loblaw-owned stores for the month of May, and he's on board.
They shouldn't be making a profit like so high that it's like hard to feed us.
The subreddit Loblaws is out of control has 57,000 members and a number of demands, such as signing the Grocer Code of Conduct and no further retailer-led price increases this year.
The hope is that we can be, taking steps to reduce grocery prices for all Canadians.
Founder Emily Johnson says she's received an email from a Loblaw executive looking for a meeting, and she's hopeful, but knows not everyone can boycott when for many Canadians, a Loblaw-owned store is the only option.
Whether you think that you can avoid Loblaw stores or not, there are plenty of ways for you to get involved and, to ensure that your voice is heard, because you're not alone in any of these struggles.
There's not enough competition. If you shop around for lower prices, that behavior in and of itself actually will cause prices to drop.
Meanwhile, a petition calling for an investigation into alleged greedflation and pandemic profiteering by Loblaw is closing in on 100,000 signatures, launched by a university student and former Superstore cashier.
The headlines that we are seeing, record profits as Canadians struggle to eat, those two are pretty tied together, I think.
Global News asked Loblaw about the petition, the boycott, and the online group's demands. In a statement, the company said it's doing what it can to combat inflation, and customers are noticing, claiming there are more visits to stores and even comments in the, quote, same Reddit groups about getting real value. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
While there are some affordable living measures in the new federal budget, the government is still grappling with the high cost of groceries. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne told Global News last fall that he was speaking with foreign grocery chains in a bid to increase competition in the sector. But this week on the West Block, he tells our Mercedes Stevenson the availability of retail space is an issue.
I met one of them in the United States, and the biggest hurdle they had was about leases. They could not find 400 or 500 leases or property to lease in Site A in the country, despite them being very big, billions of dollars.
And you can hear more from the industry minister on grocery prices tomorrow morning on the West Block right here on Global. Touched by the gift of life. Coming up, a powerful new campaign turning conversation into action in Alberta. Ontario is reportedly set to introduce tough new measures around cell phones and vaping at schools across the province. According to the Toronto Star, the measures will be among the toughest in North America and will include ways to empower teachers to follow through on the new rules. Details are said to be coming in an announcement tomorrow. Ontario's Education Minister Stephen Lecce has not confirmed the reporting, only saying in a tweet today that the province must confront the issue of cell phone distraction and vaping once and for all. Every year in Canada, there are people who desperately need life-saving organ transplants but can't get one. That wait can be excruciating, and hundreds die while they're waiting for an organ. Now, in a bid to increase organ donations and to save lives, this week the province of Alberta launched a new awareness campaign. Heather Yerkes West reports.
Heart, you're giving heart. Whether it's through a game of charades, a funny T-shirt, or with a cake, a new campaign from Give Life Alberta is encouraging viewers to make their wishes known.
I think it's fantastic. I love the fact it focuses on positive conversations about organ donation and normalizing that.
Because those conversations could become incredibly important. Kinza Barney came to know that firsthand.
But I'm stuck in colder weather. Thinks he's a pro.
We were just kind of driving and practicing for his road test, and out of the blue he asked me that question. Are you a donor?
The conversation ended with Kinza's son Zach telling his mom he wanted to be a donor too.
Again with the silly faces. The silly faces.
A few weeks later, a tragic accident would take the teenager's life.
I feel very, very fortunate that we had the opportunity to have that conversation. It made it his decision at the end of the day.
There are about 4,000 Canadians on the transplant waiting list, and it's a pretty agonizing wait.
Even though a single organ donor can save up to 8 lives, every year in Canada, hundreds on that waiting list will die. It's why there are questions about whether Canada should change its approach. In most provinces, donation is only possible if a person opts in to become a donor. But in 2021, Nova Scotia became the first jurisdiction in Canada where the willingness to donate is assumed unless the person opts out. New Brunswick has since adopted this policy too, joining Spain, a country that has followed an opt-out model for more than 40 years.
What we see is the number of individuals who, as a percentage of population, who are having their needs met when it comes to organ transplantation is significantly higher than a country like Canada.
And I think this was one of his first Oilers jerseys.
Zach's gift ultimately saved 5 people, including a young father of 2.
Even though he isn't physically here with us anymore, I can see him living on in others.
Turning tragedy into a beautiful legacy of life and love. Heather Urix-West, Global News, Airdrie, Alberta.
Ahead, the silent threat lurking beneath the surface and endangering the heart of Manitoba's summer playground. Residents and businesses in Winnipeg's cottage country are worried that Parks Canada will close access to a popular lake this spring and summer. And it's in response to zebra mussels, an invasive species that are now apparently the farthest west they've reached in Canada. Melissa Ridgen reports.
When the ice is gone in a few weeks, Clear Lake should be bustling with boats, canoes, kayaks, and swimmers. But threatening that, zebra mussels. Invaders from the Black Sea who came to Canada on cargo ships nearly 40 years ago and continue their westward spread.
It started spreading around the Great Lakes within Lake Erie, and then there's ships moving from port to port to port, bringing them to the other lakes. It escaped out of the Great Lakes into the Mississippi River drainage, and so now it's in hundreds and hundreds of lakes, mostly in eastern North America and the eastern United States. So then it started spreading westward, and it got into the Red River drainage. And then it looks like it came in through the Red River. The Clear Lake would be the most westward place in Canada.
Mollusks were reported at a boat launch in Clear Lake last fall, despite a rigorous monitoring and prevention program. But water tests this winter were negative for their DNA, though experts warn they could still be present. And without natural predators, this is what they can do. Manitoba Hydro is battling infestations at several generating stations elsewhere in the province.
Once the horse gets out of the barn, once they start invading more and more lakes, it's just really challenging at that point to contain them.
So Parks Canada is considering closing Clear Lake to watercraft this summer and even inflatable water toys.
The rumblings of a complete watercraft ban are a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, and we are asking for a look at a long-term solution.
Residents want beefed-up prevention, but so far, silence from Parks Canada, which declined to be interviewed. This expert says a potash treatment at the boat launch area could kill zebra mussels, if any remain, but that won't prevent more from coming in.
Our recommendation would be to limit boats or restrict them until they've done the treatment, and at least they have some degree of certainty that they've eradicated the mussels, and then reassess.
Ashley Smith's ancestors lived, hunted, and fished here long before it was a national park. The business owner has little faith in the federal government's ability to manage the issue.
There's lack of communication. I expressed to Parks Canada that the information isn't getting out to communities.
Those living and working here hope to be part of a plan to protect the water. So far, though, they're feeling left in the dark. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Riding Mountain National Park, Manitoba.
Next, is your favorite vacation spot being loved too much? Over tourism and how besieged cities are fighting back. Visiting one of Quebec's most popular tourist attractions is about to get more expensive. Starting on Wednesday, all those staying on the province's famed Magnolin Islands for more than 24 hours will have to fork over an extra $30 visitor fee or face a $1,000 fine. The island's mayor says tourists have been burdening local services and revenue, with the new funds being aimed at helping bolster infrastructure, environmental protections, and waste management. The archipelago northeast of PEI has a population of roughly 13,000, but welcomed about 5 times that many visitors between May and October of 2023. Heading to Europe, you might have to pay up too, with 2024 forecast to be a record-breaking year for air travel. Some of the world's most popular tourist destinations are introducing similar tactics. Redmond Shannon takes us to Venice, where, in a global first, day trippers began being charged for their visits this week.
Venetian guards not warding off Ottoman invaders, but checking QR codes to get a handle on the huge number of tourists who come to the city.
The system is very important because we are finding a new balance between the residents, the community, and the day trippers.
On certain peak days, visitors to Venice who are not staying the night will have to pay about $7 to enter the historic centre.
When you see how crowded it is today in a national holiday, yeah, you could expect something
like this.
I mean, c'est la vie, it's life.
The city has already banned large cruise ships. Tens of thousands of foreigners visit daily and are unlikely to argue the fee because they've come this far. Italian visitors, however,
Anything to enter inside the city, I don't see this fit.
many Venetians themselves are outraged. On the first day of the new trial, some of the city's dwindling permanent population made themselves heard. This will do nothing to stop over-tourism, says this woman. Residents who felt their city was becoming a theme park say this initiative only brings that closer.
Over-tourism is a growing problem across the world. Residents in some of the most popular spots are fighting back in different ways.
Amsterdam increased its hotel tax for foreigners this year. The Acropolis in Athens is capping daily visitor numbers. And a picturesque town in Austria even briefly erected a fence last year to deter swarms of selfie takers. In Spain's Canary Islands, locals say they've been squeezed out of the rental market and that their environment is under threat. Some even going on hunger strikes to protest a new hotel project. But these islands and places like Venice rely heavily on tourist dollars. Finding the balance is not easy. France is also trying to do so, encouraging tourists to avoid peak season or to visit its lesser-known sites. A possible solution to over-tourism that asks us all to not just follow the crowd. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that's Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Farah Nasser.
Oh, this is an epic event. I hope we break the world record. This is just awesome.
Tonight's Your Canada is Drumheller, Alberta, the dinosaur capital of the world, and rightly so. From a Tyrannosaurus to a Triceratops, today the town's downtown core transformed into a prehistoric paradise. As you heard, the town made an attempt to set a new world record for the largest gathering of people dressed like dinosaurs. And it looks like a success. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Have a good night.